Good evening. I am Cynthia Elliott, President of the Rochester Board of Education. We will be convening our audit committee, but I wanted to take this opportunity, first of all, welcome those who are listening, but also wanted to take an opportunity to just take a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine and the war that's going on over there. And so if we could just take a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine. Thank you very much. And then we have just one speaker who sent in comments, and so there are no speakers. And then I'll just pass it to the superintendent to give us an update on masking. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, President Elliott. Good evening, Vice President LeBron, to our commissioners and our Rochester City School District community. As you're aware, Governor Hochul made the decision she announced on Sunday that masking would be optional in New York State schools. And so Rochester City School District is planning on transitioning, according to that announcement, to optional masking in our schools and buildings as of tomorrow. As I shared earlier, mask optional doesn't mean that we stop wearing masks. If that is your choice to continue to wear a mask, then you should feel free to do that in a safe and inclusive environment. Similarly, if you choose not to mask, you should feel free to do that as well, according to what Governor Hochul has shared. We also know that County Executive Bello and Dr. Mendoza endorsed the governor's decision and indicated that masking in school should be a family's choice. We are waiting for updated guidance from the New York State Department of Health regarding contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine. And just as a quick side note, today, and some of my members of my cabinet, as well as some of our board members, we were in legislative meetings, lobby days for the Big Five today. And so we added to our agenda, given where we are with masking, we made pleas to our local and state elected officials around masking and really the need for clear guidance. And we had the opportunity to engage with Commissioner Rosa and her senior leadership team as well. I do recognize that individuals will act differently to this news. It's a very sensitive topic, and we don't want that to become polarizing in our district, and we know that it has in some other communities. And so again, anyone who wishes to wear a mask, please feel free to do so. It is important for us to respect each other's decisions as we continue to provide a safe, welcoming environment for all of our students and staff. I do need to share that ending the mask date certainly does not change our daily practices. We will still continue to provide high-quality masks to staff and students. We'll provide COVID-19 rapid test kits to anyone who requests them. And I just received an email a little while ago indicating that an 8th shipment will be coming to the Rochester City School District from the governor's office. We'll continue to offer families the option for students to participate in COVID testing, and we'll continue to make sure that we share the number of cases, COVID-19 cases, on the website. We also know, since I have this opportunity, that getting vaccinated is clearly important, and it's an important step to keep everyone safe. The Rochester City School District is partnering again with Monroe County to host 3 vaccination sites and clinics for children aged 5 to 17 over the next several days. And we do encourage families to visit our website for more information. You also are aware, Board of Education, that we did administer a survey regarding masking prior to February break, and I would like to share those results with you. So we had about 8,000 stakeholders.
I'm sorry, Leslie, we don't see the survey anywhere.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you put the survey up, please? Results? Thank you. Sure. We had 3,210 families take the survey, about 1,300 students, and 3,700 staff. It's now on the screen. You can see that for families, 2,500 were in favor of masking and 645 were not in favor. For students, you can see the numbers, 63.9% of the students who participate in the survey were in favor and 36% were not. And then for staff, 62.2% staff were in favor, whereas 37.8% were not in favor. When you look, and then you can just see the breakdown as far as students, if you'll go to the next one, which I just shared. You can see that breakout. Then you go to families, which is in purple. You go to staff, which is in orange. And then if you see the overall total results by percentage, 69.3% were in favor and 30.7% were not in favor of masking. And so we appreciate all of the stakeholders who completed the survey. We do have to uplift and understand, however, that the governor shared on Sunday that school districts would be mask optional, and it was again reinforced at the local level by County Executive Bello and Dr. Michael Mendoza. So as we will be checking our email during the meeting tonight, because the guidelines which were promised are supposed to become available shortly. And once we have that, we will have our team look at all of that information and work to incorporate those recommendations as quickly as we can. I do want to add that I certainly appreciate the patience and the flexibility of our varied stakeholders, and I am very grateful for our amazing team, our families, and our students for all of the work that they've done and their patience and flexibility to get us to this point today. We will do whatever it takes to ensure that our schools continue to remain open, that students are learning, certainly during one of the most difficult times in our history in the midst of a major pandemic. So that is the update, and I wanted to share that with the board.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Are there any questions for the superintendent? Commissioner Adams?
So I just want to be sure, are we intending to provide masks throughout the rest of this school year?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Malloy, you have any questions? No. Commissioner Simmons? No. Vice President LeBron?
You know I do. Of course I have questions, so thank you. So just a couple of questions. One is, I have been doing like school visits in the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to get through all of them. And I have heard it's very difficult sometimes for our teachers to request masks and get them. They're being told like one per classroom, like, or per person, and same with testing.
For the staff member,
For the
Vice
staff
President?
members,
Okay.
yeah. And so I just want to be sure that there's still, you know, an adequate amount of masks available for those who ask. And, you know, just even in my own household, I know that my own kid, it doesn't matter how many masks I buy her, whether they're reusable or disposable, they are literally gone. I think she's either using 2 or 3 a day or just losing them along the way. So, you know, just having access to one pack is definitely not going to be enough. And are we going to increase the amount of testing? And I will tell you all, even my 11-year-old, when I picked her up from school today, said, "Mom, if you guys are removing masks, you should increase testing in schools." And I said, actually, I do think that's a great idea, and I'm going to bring that up.
Thank you.
To figure out how do we do testing, in her words, once a week or twice a week, to go back to where we were before in terms of sampling our population to see who may be positive or not positive, even though we do know that quarantine has gone down. So some reflection there, but then I also just want to point out, and this is more for the community that's listening in and watching this, that I've also had the opportunity, as many other board members, to be behind the scenes. And I know that myself and President Elliott and the superintendent, even pre the break week, went to a meeting where Kathy, our governor, was there and was talking about coming to this decision after break. And so just understanding that there are still guidelines that the state is trying to impose on districts, and that it is going to be impossible for the district to actually do. And this is one of those situations where I do want to have to call out the state on this and say to the state that if they're requiring the district to do things like, if a student had tested positive and was in quarantine for 5 days, they have to wear a mask for 5 additional days, and not provide us with the adequate resources to implement that, and we can't implement that, then this is the best that we have at this point, is mask optional. So I'm very frustrated to have heard even today from other school districts with the same frustration, but the ridiculousness of pulling this and then putting it out there in the media that there was going to be this mask lift, but then on the flip side, behind the scenes, telling school districts that there's still going to be some sort of guidelines and requirements for masking. That's ridiculous. And we cannot do this where we're being asked. So I just wanted to put that on record, and also let the community understand and know that, you know, this is one of those communications from the state that just is not going to make sense, and we're going to try the best that we can to figure it out. But I just wanted them to know where this is coming from, because this notion that there is going to be absolutely no masking is false. There will be some requirements that the state is trying to dictate to school districts about masking. And we don't know what those guidelines are yet, and that is what our superintendent is saying, that as of right now, 5:51 p.m., this is being lifted tomorrow morning, and we don't have guidelines from the state yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. Commissioner Patterson, do you have any questions? I know that Dr. Jallo is on the call. Dr. Jallo, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
All right,
No, I don't.
thank you very much. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Patterson to chair our audit committee meeting. Commissioner Patterson?
Thank you. I'd like to call the audit committee to order. The agenda is presented. Can I have a motion to approve the audit committee agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second? All right. So that would be Commissioner Malloy and Commissioner Adams, second. Some of these agenda items that I have here, we're going to, we've already gone over, the president has already mentioned some of these agenda items. Oh, we got a vote?
Can I interject for a minute, Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
I'm looking on the agenda, and I'm seeing that we've got the suspension appeal. Do we need to vote on that now? Commissioner Patterson, okay, I'm sorry.
It's in order.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Do
Are
we need
voting
to
on
vote
this?
to approve the minutes? Thank you. You need to ask for the vote to
I did.
approve the minutes. No, you've called for the motion, and we motioned it and
So all in
seconded it, but
favor.
now
I've
you
just
say all in
put-
favor.
Okay, and I've just put the voting screen up for you guys to vote electronically as well, but he's getting ready, I think, to ask for his vote as well.
Okay, it hasn't popped up for me yet.
Yeah, it
Vanessa.
hasn't.
Sometimes it's slow.
All right, so at this time, we can take our vote. All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Any opposed?
on the
The
minutes,
agenda,
the minutes.
The minutes.
Yeah, my screen.
convening an agenda, you're now on the minutes? Did the screen come up?
No,
No,
We may have to take a verbal.
now it is.
Okay, now I see it.
Yep.
I still don't see it. Yeah.
I see two.
Okay, now it's,
Mine
yeah.
just popped up and I
I'm
signed
happy to
out.
record for everyone if you need me to.
It's popping up.
All set?
Commissioner Simmons, would you like me to vote for you?
Because hers is,
Mine, I had a reboot, so it just came up. Thank you. You should have my vote at this point.
Wonderful, thank you.
Also, for the record, Commissioner Powell is out ill, and Dr. Jallo is on Zoom.
In the past, Commissioner Powell in particular has required the board to give I guess, a
She's sick.
vote. But she's always required it for myself.
Okay.
Regardless of, and for you too, at times. All I'm saying is she's required it, but based on the bylaws, that we take a vote if it's an acceptable excuse. And if she does it for all of us, we should do it for her. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So,
And if this board is not going to practice that in the future, when she brings it up when I'm out, please do not allow her to practice it. That's it. That's all I'm asking, for the same level of
motion,
consistency.
yeah, motion to accept the excused absence of Commissioner Powell.
I'll motion.
Motion.
Who's made the motion? I'm sorry.
I don't think we need an actual motion, do we?
Do we?
No.
Kalia, do you want to weigh in on this? Because,
We've got
or do you,
parliamentarian.
Adrian, it's based on the bylaws.
I don't think you have to make a motion to accept the absence. If she's absent, she's absent. If the board so chooses, I mean, you can do it, but, you know, if you can have the motion, have the discussion, and vote. I don't think you have to.
Okay, I just want that on the record on 3/1/2022, because I can pull up videos where Commissioner Powell has, myself, or if it's Commissioner President Elliott, where she has asked for the board to vote, and this board has taken a vote on those absences, that they will accept the excuse. I will pull it up on video. There's record out there. That's all I'm saying. I'm okay with it. I thought it was a stupid practice, but if that's how we're going to move, then we need to move like that for all of us in the future. Thank you.
So
Yes, Commissioner
I
Adams?
think it's time that we start pushing back on that.
Yeah.
And I believe we'll be able to push back on that. Because I would be offended if I was in a life or death situation. I would be offended to somebody who's questioning whether or not I was legitimately out. So I think we should just push back on that if Commissioner Powell brings it back up. That's all.
Okay, all right.
Be consistent. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we're all set, moving forward? All right,
I'm just
We
going
have-
to jump in really quickly. You did a vote to accept the agenda, so now it's the minutes, just to clarify what just took place. Okay? Just clarifying, because there was, I think, so the scoreboard is now up so that you can follow along where we are on the agenda. Now it's time for acceptance of minutes.
all right, the next agenda item, we have one resolution to consider. Oh, excuse me. The next item is to review and accept the minutes. Can we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
I think that was Vice President LeBron and seconded by Commissioner Adams.
Yeah.
You open online voting?
And take the roll.
All those in favor?
Yeah, it's just discussion and then ask for a vote.
Okay. Any discussion? And we open for online voting.
And then all those in favor?
I have this recorded. But they have to verbally vote as well.
Right. All in favor?
Okay.
All in favor? A verbal vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion is passed. Moving on, we have one resolution to consider, Resolution 466, suspension appeals. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Malloy, and seconded by Commissioner Adams. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is passed.
Online voting.
Online voting?
All set, thank you. Yep.
Okay, we're all set. The next item will be performed by our auditor. I would like to turn the meeting over to the Auditor General.
I think I'll keep my mask on just to make it easier. Good evening. Tonight, I would like to go over the substitute audit report, but the first thing I would like to do is kind of just give a high-level overview to identify there's a number of types of subs, just so you can appreciate all of the manpower and the different roles and responsibilities that are given. There is a PowerPoint out there for board docs, the substitutes overview, and I just want to, just for a moment, communicate. Let me wait for the screen to come up. Great. So as it relates to substitutes, there are building substitutes, which are substitutes that are hired as a full-time employee assigned to a school building in particular. There are long-term substitutes. They're hired to fill a specific vacancy. Oh, thank you. Which, the green? Okay. We'll see how this works. I got a new toy. Long-term, fulfill a vacancy for long-term absence. The next is a short-term sub, which would be a per diem or a daily sub that we would be hiring for a teacher, a specific short-term teacher absence. And then there is an emergency teacher substitute. And that's an interesting little twist, but it is a means for which when we don't have a sub, maybe a teacher left in the middle of the day and they're only going to miss 1 or 2 periods and there happens to be another teacher in the building who can cover that time, that would be an emergency teacher sub, and we don't have to get an outside resource for that. But I just want to make sure you guys know that that exists as well. So I've got this new, oh, it did work. Okay, so just talking about building subs. A building sub is required under the per diem substitute union contract in section 24. I don't know if you're aware, but there is a separate contract under the RTA for substitutes. And so there's an expectation that the district has 25 minimum building subs that are available by contract. They're A fund, they're general fund employees, and they're budgeted at the building level. It's kind of like an additional staff member that's in the building who are fortunate enough to receive one. Under SRSA, there was an additional 81 building subs added also to the district, so that also increased the need that exists there. Since it is not your regular A funds, it is G fund or grant funded through the SRSA money, and it included 19 floating building subs in the event they want to have like a permanent person who comes to work every day but might take different locations that they're going to be assigned. Other interesting information in both cases, they are full-time, they are paid a fixed daily rate. They do get medical and dental benefits eligible to them on the first day of work. They're assigned to a particular building with the exception of those floaters, and they're included in the building staffing template because they're just like an employee that can be used in that particular building. The next is a long-term sub, and these are description words that I'm using. We generally just talk about per diem, but I am classifying each differently because I think it's important to realize the different roles people are playing, and each of these are recorded a little bit differently, so I just want to make sure that I'm bringing that specificity. Under the long-term sub, there is a vacancy sub. I use that term, and it's really a substitute filling a vacant budgeted position. So it should be a staff member that's full-time. There is no person in that role. So there might be a substitute that's filling that job all year just like a teacher, like a regular full-time staff teacher. And that person would be fulfilling the job until the vacant position's filled. So if they happen to locate and hire an individual or teacher who could fill that role, then that sub would no longer stay with us working. There's also the continuous assignment sub, and that's for a per diem sub. It's the same teacher in the same school with the same group of students. Maybe a teacher's going to be out for a month or 2 months. Maybe it's a maternity or something. So with that, that's one substitute who's functioning on a specific contract or continuous assignment to perform that work. Now, the way our substitute system is very, very complicated, but the way the rates work is you go in at a certain rate for this type of sub, and on the 16th day, there is a rate increase. Then on the 46th day, there's a rate increase, another one. And then on the 61st day, they're actually eligible for medical and dental benefits. So I just wanted to note that. It's centrally budgeted, but this year, the finance organization is moving the expense to the right school or whatever organization uses those funds, but they are centrally budgeted at this point. So that's what's in that particular group. The last one, or almost last, is our short-term subs. These are really the common ones that we all think of, which are kind of your per diem substitutes. They're day-to-day assignments. There's no one school the person belongs to. They just answer the call and show up somewhere. Their rate increases only occur after either the 50th day or 100th day in a school year. So after they've worked that many assignments, that's when they're going to be eligible for an increase in their rate of pay. There are no medical or dental benefits available to them. They're centrally budgeted, and once again, they are expensed at the school level for the budget dollars. The interesting thing when you're dealing more so with the short-term subs is there's this paid absence bank qualifier that exists in the RTA contract. Specifically, if there is an illness day or a injury day where the district's not able to get a sub to fill that spot, we then would be owing the RTA a half a day for each unfilled absence into this bank that they have. The bank's been around for many years. I did not find out the current balance, but at the end of each fiscal year, there's kind of a reconciliation and agreement between labor relations and the union as to how many days have been earned in this bank. The bank is generally used for illness, for teachers who may be out of time and those types of illnesses that might come up. But I just wanted to bring that also to your attention. The last item, of course, is the emergency teacher sub. They're going to cover a period or a block in their school. They're just covering for that absence. They would be getting paid as an existing teacher 20% of their daily rate for covering an extra period, or covering 25 if it's an extra block, centrally budgeted, and it's expensed at the school level. So I just wanted to provide just kind of that high level, these are all the types of subs, and you've got to appreciate that despite whatever role the individual is playing, that our HR department would be responsible for making sure the staffing was available to try to cover our needs, and we have multiple ways to try to do that. Next, I would like to actually just get into now our substitute management division follow-up report. I will wait for that document, or do I have that available? Wait, okay. Are there any questions on those high-level classifications? Okay, Commissioner wait.
I have a question.
Okay.
The PAB, and I saw that when I was reading my, going through the document, so my concern is that we even have that as a negotiating point, number one. And number two, I think it's important that we look at it, we can get into the document, you know, how many days do our, well, let me just go a little higher. When we talk about substitutes, are we only talking about teachers, or are we talking about principals and other classifications?
In this case and for this work, we're really specifically dealing with the teacher
Teachers,
issue.
okay.
Yes.
All right, and so that concerns me particularly because I know, and I'm sure other people know, that a lot of people take advantage and abuse our sick time. And that's not only teachers, but that's throughout the district. That everybody, you know, they say they got this kind of time when they're going to be leaving. They go on sick leave first, right? So, you know, I have a number of questions in the document, but I wanted to just to put out there on Front Street that the fact that we are paying, giving the district a certain amount of money to cover teachers who may be out, and we have, and I'm not saying all, but I do know that there are teachers who abuse this sick time policy. And so how many sick days do teachers get?
My understanding is it's 10 days per year.
10 days per year. Okay, and so they accumulate.
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay.
And
That's all for right now, the high level.
Thank you. Commissioner LeBron?
I'm like, 10 days per year. Listen, I would go through that in a month. I have a couple of questions. So I guess I'll start with the CRESA substitute teachers that were put into the CRESA budget. Let me just say this, because I've gone to buildings and I will continue to bring up the fact that our schools are still struggling and they don't have the proper staffing that they need. So when we added 81 subs to the buildings where we still have gaps in subs, that doesn't mean anything in terms of an actual body and an actual classroom being covered. Just means we added 81 positions through these dollars, but we still have shortages in our regular substitute, long-term and building subs. So adding 81 positions, it looks good on paper, but it doesn't actually mean anything to our schools because there are no bodies to fill those positions. So I just had to put that out there because, you know, it's one of those things where schools were getting calls like, hey, we're adding a position to your school, but not an actual person or a body, just a position. And it's only short-term and temporary, and it may or may not be filled. And so in the actual audit, I think that you're going to go into next in further details, it said something like HCI or HC, what it's called, is doing rigorous recruitment. And I haven't seen it. And I know that I brought this up a few weeks ago. And I just want to bring it back to the forefront. And I know that you're going to cover some stuff in the audit. But I would love to see what rigorous recruitment looks like for all the positions that we have open, including subs. The other thing I did want to ask, like for our long-term subs that we have this tier where we start them at, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, depending on when they start, how long they're going to be, and their rate increases to the third tier. Like if we know, especially right now, because again, we're in this very highly competitive market for the workforce, the most competitive I've ever seen in my entire life, primarily because of COVID and where we're at in economics and all of it. Why we know that if we're going to hire a long-term sub, why we can't actually start them at the higher tier versus making them go through the three-tier system, if you will. Do you want me to stop there and then you want to answer? Or?
Well, that particular question I certainly cannot answer as it relates to why we wouldn't, to make the decision to hire. I think that it would be appropriate to allow management to take a look at what the true cost would be and see what type of funding they can have to assess that. Would that be agreeable to you, Superintendent?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the last slide of this, page 6, it talked about the emergency subrate. And actually, I want to understand what system is actually in place to manage this, because when I first came on, it was essentially budget, but it wasn't being managed anywhere. And so I don't know if you recall, there was some teachers who had documented for themselves through an Excel spreadsheet all of the blocks and periods that they were covering, and they did their own calculations. And I don't ever recall there being a transition where there was going to be an internal system that monitored and covered that. It was just teachers submitting on their own through an Excel spreadsheet. So I just want to understand what system's been put in place.
So I do know for a fact it is a supervised process or a managed process by an individual in our human capital department. To get to the actual details of that, I would almost think, would it be more appropriate to have them present to you how that's managed or send something in writing to you about the management process? But I do know that there are authorizations and there's documented materials. It's not any teacher can send in information on their own and do that. So if you would allow an opportunity, I would gladly work with Dr. Miller or his team to forward to you exactly how that process is managed.
Yeah,
Would that be acceptable?
That's acceptable. I would just like to understand that system because I can go back to emails when I first started on the board, and that was just a few short years ago where teachers were managing it on their own and then, not being paid, and so that was a issue.
Absolutely correct. That is true that in the past, that did at one point happen, but there is a process around it.
Yeah, I just would be curious about what that process is, so that would be great if you could give me some evidence of that and
Okay.
educate me on what that system is and what it looks like. And then finally, we're talking about substitutes. We don't have enough substitutes if anybody in the community is listening and you're interested. But I am still and remain concerned about hiring right now and how we hire folks and the lack of hiring the folks that we need. And so I want to encourage people to apply, but then I want to make sure that there is the actual connection to folks when they apply and what the next steps are and so forth. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure I'm reading this right. So when I look at building substitutes and I look at long-term substitutes, the only difference is they don't get personal time and sick time.
No, so the difference between a building sub is just like another teacher in the school. So whenever the first like if a teacher happens to call in sick, that building sub is going to cover that job. And that building sub reports to that building every single day of the year, ready, willing to work or do whatever needs to be done in that building for whoever's not there.
So they have all the benefits of a regular teacher?
Correct. They're just like a normal teacher in the building, and they're on the staffing template. They're just like extra resource in the building to meet the needs, the substitute need.
Okay, okay.
Whereas the long-term sub is going to be someone on a particular assignment. They're not on anyone's staffing template. They're fulfilling a very short-term leave. They don't get any benefits. They're not coming every day. They only come when they're actually doing a job.
All right.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I will move into the report, if that would be okay, but I did want to just comment on one of the things that Vice President LeBron had mentioned. Interestingly enough, I did touch bases today as I was talking to one of the individuals who's running the substitute division. She actually said with the COVID rates going down quite a bit, as well as some of the increased staffing in the substitute area, they were like at an 80% fill rate, which was quite positive as it related to substitute jobs. And so the challenge in this particular area we should consider is we were in a situation or in a time frame where we already have people shortages, and then we're dealing with COVID leaves and people needing to quarantine and different people who've been out. So you're really magnifying a problem anyway with all of that going on. So it's kind of hard to see or balance out how bad is it or how good is it because you have so many factors. And I think with the COVID, people being out and the COVID rates being way down, we can probably really get a better look at, okay, how are we doing with fulfilling these staffing needs and how many jobs are truly open and how much are we really not covering some of the building needs? Go
Can I
ahead.
just respond to that a little bit? So yes, COVID, absolutely 100% at the forefront of some of these issues. But there are other reasons staff are out. They're out for medical, they're out for personal, they're legally allowed to, and they should. If somebody's going through something, you have the time, take it. That's why we have these banks, that's why we have family medical leave. Like, these are things that exist and exist for a reason. But I don't want it to just be COVID related because substitute, as you know, this is an area and an issue where it's come up for us, multiple audits, multiple budgets, under budgeting for this and not proper planning, no systems in place. And I did see that the system fell to the wayside, and that was a little disheartening to see. But at the flip side of that, there was also lots of transition. And so if you're coming into a district and you didn't realize that there was a substitute issue and you're coming in and they just started this brand new system, but it wasn't really vested into the larger system, I could see why it could easily fall to the wayside in terms of oversight and, management. But I just want to uplift that there are other reasons that folks are out and that we still don't have enough building subs. So 80% sounds great, but when I go to schools and I see that people are struggling because they don't have the subs that they need that day, because they may have a staff person who, again, is out on family medical leave or for personal reasons or medical reasons, they just don't have the sub pre-COVID. So again, adding 81 positions sounds good in theory, but it doesn't mean anything on a day-to-day basis to our schools if there's no bodies physically there to do the work.
Absolutely agreed. And I wasn't suggesting that's the only reason, but it is a factor that could be playing in. And I think this allows them to then manage. And as we go through some of the items in the report, we'll identify some things that could be reviewed, managed, monitored, et cetera, to help deal with some of those issues you're referring to. I'll go on. Moving to the report, I'm going to actually start with the individual item. Okay, this isn't moving, so I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not advancing. There we go. Now it's moving. Is it me?
I think I see the pointer on the ceiling. So I don't know if
I'm trying. I'm pointing. Oh, there it is. Yeah. All right, so there is the summary, but I'm actually going to move to page 4. For simplicity, we can always go back to this, but I'm going to just hit one at a time. So the first item is just trying to make sure we have protocols and procedures. There was a lot of work that the organization as a whole is doing with protocols and procedures. Some things were written, there were efforts made in this area, but they weren't clear and specific enough to allow us to allow someone coming in, if they needed to follow them, to use them. So there's just additional work needed here, but we do recognize it is partially completed. There was work performed in that area. I wish I could, it's like, oops, it's like between pages. see if I can get, please. Pardon? I want to be on page 5. Thank you. So on page 5, the item was about the budget and making sure that the spending for substitutes is really monitored. So when we started, if we think about the fiscal challenges we had in 2019, one of our issues is we were not only under budget, but we were under monitoring and managing this area. And so we know how critically important it is if you just have subs working and you're not really doing checks and balances to ensure when resources are here, that they truly are for teacher absences, that there is some sort of oversight. And so when we looked at the budget back then, we were spending in the neighborhood of $14 million in the substitute area. It greatly dropped during COVID times when we were pretty much closed because we really didn't need as many resources. And even now, we're currently under budget. The concern, and as I was talking to Dr. Miller, and I will just note as it relates, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we go through these items and we sit down then with the leaders of that organization who are the ones who in the follow-up status identify what they're going to do and what their current actions are, and they come up with the timeframes to fix some of these items. And so one of the concerns that came up from Dr. Miller was the desire to really separate vacancy subs. Those are vacant positions that they totally do need to staff, and their eyes are on it from a staffing perspective. However, they're not true subs. So when you're looking at a centralized pool of dollars, and the pool of dollars is including your vacancy subs, your per diem daily subs, your contract subs, if all the subs are in one big bucket, it made it appear as though it'd be a little easier to manage and see how they were doing it in the substitute budget when we get down the road. And the challenge with that is right now we have resources, but if we look out a couple of years, that might hurt if we're not monitoring. That will hurt a lot if we're not monitoring, because we might get back to the place where we were, where this was an out of control area. So the big desire from the Chief of Human Capital is really making sure active involvement in the budgeting process, and also ensuring that we separate the vacancy subs, because if we think about from a budget perspective, there's a centralized pool of dollars for substitutes that sits, and then we are now allocating to building as it's used. But that usually is going to be an opportunity if the vacancies are sitting in that same pool of dollars that has to be allocated, then we're going to be budgeting in that pool of substitute dollars. But when we take a substitute and put them in a teacher position, that position's already been budgeted. So then that is going to result in budgeting in both spots. And so really finding a way to ensure that if the substitute is filling an actual budgeted position, then should that the substitute's dollars come from the dollars associated with that. And so there's some back office work that needs to be done in a conversation and a communication to say, how can we do this, or how can we track this so that we don't have this pool of dollars on one side, and yet people who would be supported in that pool of dollars are actually filling jobs that are in our personnel budget. Yes, President
Yeah,
Elliott?
so let me just, so is that a finance issue to make sure that we're not, see, because I'm thinking that if the teacher's out, they're still getting paid, and then you have to fill that with a substitute, right? So I guess I'm not clear what you're saying, other than well, it probably is an HR and a finance, because we have to determine how much money that we're spending on substitute costs. And so I'll leave it out because I'm trying to think that through in terms of how that impacts in terms record keeping certain. We need to know, how many substitutes that we're using. But then it would seem to me that the teacher vacancy is somewhat neutral. And I may be wrong on that, but I think that as I'm talking about that as well, that we need to have that data as well to determine, how many vacancies that we have on a monthly basis, or, some kind of trending. That information would help us to determine, what decisions have to be made. So I'm sort of trying to, I'm sort of waffling as I'm talking, but I'm trying to figure out how do we account for the subs and then account for the vacancy and what all of that means. So
Great. And
from this, what I hear myself saying is that there's a role in there for the substitutes and that accounting, and also for the vacancy of that teacher. So
Yes.
I'll leave it there for right now.
Vice President LeBron?
Okay.
I agree with that, President Elliott. And as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, a formula. Why isn't there a formula to figure out a factor? What is the rate of absenteeism for our staff, for whatever reason that they're absent, right? Which is irrelevant. Let me just put that out there. I want to put out that it is irrelevant why a staff person chooses to take a day off or is out. If it's personal and medical, that's their business. But I do want to just ask, why isn't there a formula that's factored? Here is our rate of absenteeism. Here's the rate that it's going to cost us at Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 to cover these absences. And why isn't there a formula to factor this out? Again, I want to point out this has come up. This is the area I'm talking about. This has come up year after year after year of us under budgeting, not really having a plan and oversight and management. And I know that the previous superintendent was trying to put something in place. It was a little janky, but it was something to start us off. But then I can see why it fell to the wayside, right? COVID happened, there's other emergencies and other things happening, and it wasn't a solid system of monitoring to begin with. So I want to point that out because we had transitions in our human resources department as well. Was not a strong system of oversight and accountability to begin with. It was literally the bare minimum that they did to say we are doing something, to have an eye on it at this level, but that was never fully vested into this system. But understanding what is the rate of absenteeism? What is the cost to cover that rate, right, year to year? And why isn't that like a standard formula and in very plain language so that everybody can understand that?
So in an effort, there are some more items that are further into the report that we might touch upon that kind of answer some of that. But at the most simplistic level, there was just the desire to be able to separate some of these groups so that it facilitates better management or evaluating the rate, and it just allows a lot more clarity from the human capital's perspective as they're trying to manage the staffing resource. So it really is a partnership, and as you'll note, we did include our chief financial officer, because both she as well as the chief of human capital, everyone needs to get together under Dr. Morris's direction, where we're going to sit down and come up with a solution that's going to make this work better. Okay?
I just want to point out, I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Morris in terms of responsibility. She should be listed here too, because both of these individuals are chief level and report up to her. So ultimately, the responsibility is hers to make sure that all these two chiefs that she oversees are talking and figuring this out. Just want to put that on record.
No problem. I'll make that friendly edit. Although she was involved and the report was reviewed with her and we sat down and did all this work with her, so it's understood that they work for her, but yes. Moving on to page 6. Vacant positions. So, we were looking, it was partially complete, some work had been done, but vacancies continue to be a challenge. It's already been mentioned by the two commissioners here. And, it's really determining where do we need to go from here. We need to really assess. We're doing the budget right now. Are the vacant positions appropriate? The ones that are in the budget, do they need to be there? One thing we were trying to do a little analysis, and we thought this would totally make sense for administration to track, is saying, okay, so we have a certain number of vacant positions. Are they all actually getting subs to support them? If not, do we really need the vacant position? Really, where does that position reside? But we really want to make sure there is a strategic initiative to increase the potential candidates to deal with the vacancies, and really make sure we have the right-sized vacancies inside of our budget so that we don't have, and I think back to when we even had some of the challenges back in, around 2019, there were so many vacant positions, there was no chance of HR possibly hiring all the people they had in there. So while it may not be as bad as it used to be, the question becomes, let's make sure we take a good, clean look at it as we're making this budget this year to ensure that if the vacancy is there and we have no intentions of hiring, or we can get away with not hiring, that they're not sitting there as another distraction for who needs to get hired.
And you mean budgeted? That's what you mean, okay. So if I could, let's talk about that in terms of, because there's been this decision that, and I'm talking about previously, that we've included vacant positions in the budget. Do we need to do that? What is the practice? What do we need to do? What's the safe way of, excuse me, that we're putting these jobs, these vacant positions in the budget, which is blowing up the budget? And so what is the way in which we should do this? And of course, we do know we need to fill, we're going to need to fill positions, but do we need to fill as many, do we need to account for we've got 147 vacancies. Do we need to include that number of vacancies in the budget?
Okay, so there are like 267.
Oh, I'm looking at a number down
147
here
is,
under.
but all the same. So if our plan, when we make the budget, is our plan
Oh, I'm
and our
sorry, yeah,
desired
267.
impact that we would have, we were expecting and hoping to have those people in place. I think the challenge is, considering the current times, we might want to reassess and say, knowing that we cannot get all the people we would like to have or we desire to have for the things we're planning, we might want to sit there and say, based on our priorities, maybe it makes sense to really focus on these particular jobs because we really need people in these roles. But I will defer to management to determine what their needs are. I'm the auditor. I can't really say what they need in teaching and learning. But I think it is critically important that they determine what the need and what direction they're going in and the desires. But we do need to make sure that there's not pie in the sky or really something that would be considered extra or extraordinary, different from what our real need is.
Yeah, so 267, is that a reasonable, I mean, that, we probably are not going to hire 267 during the budget season, so what's a reasonable number that we should include? And what is that information based on?
And remember, we need to, if we have any intentions in the fiscal year to hire those positions, they do need to be in the budget earmarked to cover the salaries. Otherwise, it would be irresponsible to plan on hiring and not have the money set aside for it.
Okay, so let's just be specific. In this case, are we looking that we're going to hire 267 positions for this budget year?
So this is as of this current fiscal year. This
Yeah.
isn't the budget season we're going into. So I think when you get your new budget book and all of the details behind that, I guess it'll be worthwhile to see exactly how many vacant or extra positions are there and what exactly are the roles and responsibilities
Yeah,
intended.
we need to be mindful of that.
Yes.
We really need to be mindful of that. I don't know if it's prudent for us to put all of those positions in the budget, but I'm not sure. Someone who has a greater mind on this needs to be answering that for me. But I remember, us getting criticized that we had a bloated budget based on some vacant positions.
President Elliott, we
All right,
had.
I think
I'm sorry.
Dr. Jello might want to say something.
She's just listening.
She's just listening.
Okay, she's fine.
You're muted.
I said, I'm really listening because I'm really interested in knowing just how many vacant positions are going to be in the budget that they're about to present.
All right. Vice President?
Thank you. Yeah, we're still waiting for the budget, so, I just want to uplift that because those are things we all should go in and look at and see what's happening. I guess for me, I'm a little bit confused because I'm constantly asking about staff shortages, and I know that this focuses on teachers and administrators because the substitute system is for teaching and administrators. I don't know if we have subs for paras and TAs. I know we use tests for folks as well. But I'm trying to understand because I constantly hear on the, inside, if you will, or from state sometimes that we have all of these teachers on assignment and that we have all these vacancies and that we are overstaffed still, but then again, I go to schools, we're understaffed. Every school I've gone to, not one school has told me I am fully staffed with teachers, paras, TAs, even maintenance people are short, food services. So how do we get a clear understanding of where our actual vacancies are at the school level? How many teachers on assignment are there? Where are those teachers placed? Is there a way to do some crossover and use those TOAs? And I know, and I want to recognize that some of them may be working on special projects, some of them are doing coaching, trying to get a better understanding of where they're at, because I don't want to just throw out a general term of like teachers on assignment doing other work. Some of that work is important work too that needs to be done. And if that's the role that they're going to be in, then have them in that role and then open that teacher's seat up so that it's filled in a different way. But I don't know any of this stuff. Like, I don't know because I haven't been told and I can't see it. I can't hear it from anywhere. So to look at 267 vacancies, I would be curious to understand how many of those 267 are actually teachers versus administration. Because all it says is that 147 of these are filled with long-term substitutes. And then also, again, having like an analysis of where our TOAs are at, and what roles that they're playing, and if they can fill in some of these vacancies. And then administrators, I know people that apply for administration jobs and couldn't get a call from us. So we have these vacancies, how do we fill them? And how are we better stewards of, in a competitive market, making sure that we're snagging people who are eligible and qualified and can come in and make a difference in this district, and that we don't lose them to other districts because we're not fast enough, if you will.
Thank you. Superintendent Myers-Small, did you have something to say?
I did, but I was listening and I lost my train of thought. It was a little while ago.
Yeah, did Dr. Jallo have a, Dr. Jallo?
I might circle back, I'm sorry.
I think, some of these questions we can put in the question log, I think that'd be a good idea, eh?
Can I just say one thing? By state statute, this district is supposed to have a balanced budget today. So I hope that this delay in conversation is not going to be too far off, because already we're in violation of state law. So the conversation is good. I just hope that you realize your timeline and that it's not extended too far beyond today's date. So that's all I'll say for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Jello.
Okay.
Continue.
The next item is teacher absenteeism, and we just really want to make sure that to the extent possible, there is a robust plan to minimize teacher absenteeism, and making sure there is a communication of a plan with the teachers union. We're not suggesting sick people show up at school, but maybe there be incentives or things to encourage folks to show up. We really look at the root cause issues associated with some of the increased absenteeism, and see if there are things that we could remediate to reduce teachers being out during the year, because we do have a very high percentage of absences.
Jill, Anissa, is that a typo in the first line there? Almost 74,000 smart find jobs filled?
No. So
What does that mean?
those are lines in a period. It's not a it's not individual like jobs. How do I explain that? This is based upon the data that was over a couple of years, and it was cumulative data. So what happened was, when we first wrote the report, we generally don't completely change the original observation. We actually audit the current state against the original observation, and we didn't accumulate the number of lines. We can certainly provide that to you to tell you how many jobs were filled in the fiscal year, of course, or year to date. We can certainly provide that information for this current period, but still, looking at the prior period over the current period, the absences were approximately the same amount. So it was around 36% when you looked from 17 to 19, so that would have been over 2 fiscal years, and it's still 39% when you look between 19 and 22.
Yeah, but this says 74K.
And so that would have been a sum of multiple years.
That still doesn't seem to be right.
I can go back and check it, or I can actually, just for fun, I don't have that. Do you have that with you yet?
At a later time is fine.
I can circle back with you and provide the support for it, but I can show you what it is that we did. But it was a sum.
have a question. Has anyone done a poll on why the rate of absenteeism is so high? I mean, are there any unions done any polls relative to their people that we know of, or the administration done a poll to see why it's so high?
I love that you asked that question, Commissioner Patterson, because when you look at organizations and you see high rates of absenteeism, oftentimes it is attributed to low morale and things of that nature on top of a pandemic and things of that nature. But outside of the things that we can't control in regards to the pandemic, what is going on culturally within the district that we are seeing such high absenteeism rates? So I love that question.
And that would be appropriate tracking or monitoring. That would be something that technically human capital would try to be aware of. I think that makes sense to have that type of monitoring to see what are the instances. I know I've heard things like they're so stressed, there's so much going on, there's a lot of the behaviors, this is very difficult, they really need to take that break. And it is like a sick day, almost a mental health day, to keep our teachers going, and the difficulty. But you know, really getting behind some of the root cause issues, what's going on, what are the numbers, and what we can do to make things better. But I think these are all interrelated. If you don't have enough resources, you're understaffed, you don't have the supports the kids need, you've got a teacher in a room with a large group of children and they all have behaviors and they haven't been in school for a couple of years, there's a lot going on. It is very difficult. It's hard to keep the morale where you need to have it. Vice President LeBron, did you have something to say?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it just nails it on the head. Like if in the room, if you're a teacher, you're in the classroom and you don't have the supports, not from your administration, from the district, you don't feel valued, you don't feel appreciated. I've said this plenty of times and I'll repeat it until I leave this board. We do not appreciate and value hard work and hard-working individuals in this district. We just don't. And we don't have a good way of showing it. So that's one. But two, I'm just trying to understand, you get 10 sick days and 2 personal days. That's not a lot. Like even myself, I'm very fortunate. I get like 5 weeks personal sick. It's all like included. And my job doesn't like micromanage when that happens. If I wake up tomorrow and I'm having a mental health day, I could just let my boss know I'm having a mental health day. I will make sure that the work gets done. And I know that it's different with teaching because you're in front of children and you have to be there physically. It's the same even with UPK, EPK, right? You have a staff absence there, you could throw ratios off. And that's a whole different subset of regulations that need to be met. But just trying to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about, I guess, like chronic absenteeism when there's only like 12 days collective. What other time off can they take? Because 10 days out of a year is only 1 day a month out of a school year, and then 2 personal days. I'm just trying to understand this, like how does this add up?
I think it's in the accrual.
And I think it's interesting because if you think about it though, in the case of teachers, they are still getting the holidays and those weeks off that the students are getting, so they're getting
But they're not getting paid for the summer. They're getting paid for the holidays, but not the
they get those
summer.
weeks off, like last week was a paid week off for teachers. So if you think about it, they're getting Christmas break and winter break and some of those breaks. So I don't know how it balances, and I'm not trying to justify more flexibility because funny enough, my thought was, gee, if we made it more flexible for them to take time off, would that help and could we plan better? I don't know the answer to any of that because I'm not trying to manage a teaching staff. But I do hear you. It seems not a lot, but then when you start adding up how many full weeks do the students get off during a particular school year in addition to the summer, then maybe it doesn't come out to be as bad because you're supposed to work straight around year round with no weeks off. Whereas they've built in weeks off in addition to the holidays.
But those holidays, it's one of those things, like that's just the nature of this job. You have summers off, it comes with the breaks, right? And I'm not in front of kids during breaks because school's not in session. I'm not required to physically be here if I have no kids in front of me. So again, like we're talking about 12 days collectively. Are there more days off? Am I missing? Like,
Could it be a concentrated number of days off collectively, or could it include short-term disability or long-term disability cases possibly? But I think for me, it would become a matter of identifying the factors for the concentrated days off and why it's so high to what Vice President LeBron is saying, but also that plan of action, once the factors are confirmed and identified, what is the plan of action to support, like specific plan of action, not just a statement, we want to reduce absenteeism, but what that looks like, feels like, sounds like for the people that are going to be impacted by that.
So I still would like to get an answer right now about what is the total amount of time off that teachers get. I heard accumulation, I hear short-term, long-term disability, but there's a process for that too. If you're applying for short-term, long-term disability, that's sometimes not planned. Obviously, there's a reason, but there's a process. Your doctor has to approve it, you have to submit paperwork, so there has to be some level of heads up, and that's, again, I'm not here to, like, again, ever, for any staff person in any job, ever tell somebody why they can or can't take time off, personal or medical, that's your business, and you have a right to do it, and you have the time to do it. But I'm talking about 12 days out of an entire year, so I don't want to count last week, because last week is part of their contract, it's in there, that they get those days off and those days are paid. I'm trying to understand, out of 12 days, even if it accumulates, I mean, that's a lot of accumulation for only 10 days out of a school year. How does that, I need to understand how much actual time off do teachers get besides the 10 days for sick days, 2 days for personal, what else is there?
So are you adding up, you're not adding the weeks they're off, they work the 180, there's the 180-ish required days, and of the 180 days of instruction, that's where those 12 days would come in. So
The
I'm
students
not
are
sure I
required to be
understand
here
your question.
180 days, and so they're getting the same days off that the students are getting, no?
Yes, for the most part, it depends. They have a few days that they probably work that the students wouldn't be
Right,
in
like
place,
superintendent's conference days or something
Right,
like that.
right, they're required to come in for those and
Yes.
for training.
I
Yeah,
just want to make sure I understand your question. So when you
I
say
guess
how
I'm
many
trying
days-
to understand, are you all counting that the breaks that they get towards the chronic absenteeism?
No.
Then what are you bringing up the breaks for? I'm asking about the 10 days that they get for sick time and the 2 days of personal. How do we get from 12 days in a school year, that's all they get paid, on a regular, I'm just talking about regular circumstances, so not long-term, short-term, to 39% of chronic absenteeism with
Okay,
12
so-
days?
So you would like for me to provide the support for the percentages? Is that what you're asking
I
for?
I
or
would
do you
like
want
to
a further
understand that,
question?
but right now I want to understand, do they get more than 12 days per year? That's it, 12 days, 2 days for personal, 10 for sick.
Yeah, Vice President LeBron, I would, yes, that's accurate, and I don't know that this administration has suggested that there's a chronic absenteeism issue per se, right? I think we could certainly do some further data analysis to provide some data. I would uplift our staff and our teachers in particular that, and I was a teacher, that the majority of teachers, I would say when we look at national data, that I was very familiar with data in another district, that the majority of teachers typically are taking no more than 3 to 7 days per year, right? And so they are banking days, right? And the history of unions and the history of the teaching profession was that these days were given to a majority, right, of women who were in the teaching profession because there weren't things like long-term disability or short-term disability. And so unions negotiated, right, with districts to have days which then teachers could bank so that if they needed them when those needs came, they would have a bank of days. And so our teachers also are able to bank days as well. But you know, anywhere from 20 to 25% of our teachers, I would imagine, if it's consistent with national data, are actually taking 3 or fewer days a year, right? So I just want to uplift that most folks are not taking all their days, and they know, I think most teachers know in the profession, that we save those days in the event we need them. Maybe we're going to be pregnant and we want to extend that time in some way, and so we want those days, and we don't know what's going to happen catastrophic in our lives. And so I think that's the history of the days and the use, and we could certainly do some analysis in
I
our
would like an
district.
analysis,
But I would think it
yes.
would be consistent with some of the data.
Yeah, I would like some further analysis on this number. I mean, we're throwing this out there, we're throwing it out there publicly, but then we're also not really breaking down 39% of what actual number. If they're only getting 12 days, there are better jobs out there that give more time. I just want to put that out there because, you know, especially now at this day and age, it's not even valued and appreciated what folks do to work in a school system. So I just need to understand this further. I would love further analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'd just like to add, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Now,
Madam
I'd
President.
just like to add, I think that, and Anissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we're looking at it holistically, not as just an individual teacher, in the sense that if there is a substitute deficit, for lack of a better term, and we've got, what, 3,000 teachers, 4,000 teachers, somewhere around there, then I think that's where the issue may be in terms of the substitute, the management of the substitute division, and taking it holistically. It's where I think that the issue is, because to your point, if it's 10 days per teacher, then that shouldn't be an issue per se. But I do know that there has been, you know, and I'm not necessarily talking about teachers, but just throughout this district, that people, if they were going to be leaving the district, they were going to be taking off sick time, and then they would leave the district. And so, and for that kind of scenario, I think we have to look at if there is some abuse in that whole process, and then, you know, how do we reduce the substitute costs? Because they are filling vacancies of people being sick, in this case, teachers. And so how do we reconcile that we've got a issue with our substitute management division and vacancies? Now, you know, if we're being told there's not, but I'm looking at the fact that we're even here, and there's this audit around the substitute management division, if that makes sense. So we have to look at it holistically. And I think that's where this is coming from, as opposed to just an individual staff member.
All right, if there's any more comments, we're going to proceed forward.
Moving into Smart Find, which would be on page 8. Did somebody say something? Okay. We want to make sure that all jobs are properly reported in Smart Find. So when we look, are you good? So Smart Find is our system where we're recording teacher absences, right? So that's where we're going to get. So when we look at the absenteeism in the last recommendation, we saw that 39% were for illness and personal of the jobs that were absent. So we're looking at that percentage of what's there. When we look at Smart Find, we want to ensure that we're tracking and we're properly recording the jobs in Smart Find. And we want to make sure that that's monitored so that we have complete and accurate information for absenteeism, as well as for whenever a job is filled. So we really want to make sure there's good reporting, monitoring, escalation for the jobs in the Smart Find system, because this would be the one source for data tracking. This would probably give you a lens of all of the information and what's happening as it relates to substitutes, because all of the substitute jobs in theory will be there. Moving on to page 9 and number 6, it really is more about monitoring of the unrecorded teacher absences. We really want to make sure that the teacher absences in the Smart Find system are reconciled to PeopleSoft. So regular teachers are paid in PeopleSoft, and the Smart Find absences are actually recorded in our substitute system. So the two systems have to talk, because when it's time, when a substitute is working, we actually have a system where we're trying to connect, saying, this person was absent, this person worked for them, and they're connecting that to make sure that the absence is recorded for the teacher and the pay is recorded for the substitute. So we just need to make sure that the proper tracking is taking place, that there's a reconciliation between the two, so that every absence is appropriately accounted for in payroll processing, except it occurs as it should. Moving on to recommendation 7, we are dealing with exception reporting. We do have exception reports that spits out whenever we don't follow the process as we should, or there was some sort of error in how the substitute's time was recorded, or a teacher's absence was recorded. There could be someone hiring a substitute outside of the system. There could be a number of ways where there is not a sync up. But we actually have put the time in to kind of connect and identify when someone has hired a sub and didn't follow the process as they should have. This exception report, if you recall, under Mr. Kennedy, when he was actually here, this was the first big task they had to clean up. And so we're at this point right now where we do have quite a few pages and many lines of content where we really need to clear exceptions, because that means someone either filled the job wrong or didn't connect to an existing teacher, et cetera. And we just want to make sure this is happening. Now, this was one that I know Dr. Miller and his team is urgently working on to clear all the exceptions and make sure they can figure out what went wrong, how, make sure that the accounts are charged appropriately, and things happen as they should for that. Number 8, or page 11, is talking about incorrect payments. We actually saw in the system that there's still the opportunity for 2 substitutes to be paid for the same teacher absence. It's just something that would potentially come out on the exception report, so that could be a cleanup. It could be totally inadvertent where they might have pulled the drop down and picked the wrong teacher, whatever. Regardless, it's something that needs to be cleaned up. But it was an issue that we had found previously, and it still exists. So that is also going to be kind of included when Dr. Miller's team is working in the exception reports. They're going to be able to deal with some of the incorrect payments that potentially might have occurred. Recommendation 9 on page 12 is dealing with certification. There is the expectation that we actually have certified substitutes. The challenge becomes, you know, especially for substitutes after 40 days, they really should be teacher certified. That's the gold standard, and that's what we'd love to have. Unfortunately, we're having a great deal of difficulty finding those. I postponed it because the reality is we're having trouble finding someone who is qualified to even be in front of the kids in any way. So I think the struggle is we've kind of said postpone temporarily, not that we aren't still actively trying to get as many certified individuals as possible and the highest level of qualifications, but we also want to make sure that we're not trying to say, no, we don't want you because you're not a certified teacher, because at this point, we really might have people with skill sets who may not have the certificate yet or is in process. And so we want to make sure that this work will be done, but in this current stage, we have such a shortage going on. We couldn't honestly respond to this one quite yet. We're going to keep it open, and as things shift, we're going to more actively deal with that. Recommendation 10 and page 13 is dealing with roles and responsibilities. Looking at the way that the business process is working, we really need to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are signed and resources are appropriate to actually run this. It kind of goes a little bit towards your comment, Vice President LeBron, when you commented, okay, if people come, can we receive them? And so the challenge becomes, if they come, do we have enough staff to receive them? I'm aware that Dr. Miller has added at least a full-time resources to this particular area, but we really need to make sure we're crystal clear about who does what where, how do we make the process work effectively, and we really do need to make sure that if someone presents themselves ready and able to work, that we're able to get them onboarded and in front of kids as soon as possible. So we do know that there were a number of ads in the Human Capital Department, and I know there's a dedicated resource added to this unit, and that will help. A little aside, it was kind of my itch personal, so I'll just add that on the side. Here we are looking for teachers and we have a shortage. We really need to consider, is there a possible resource where we don't ask anyone, we're asking people to fingerprint. We're asking people who just left the district to fingerprint before they can come back. People are not going to reach in their pocket and pay over $100 to fingerprint when they've just been here. In addition, if we have a shortage, why are we asking people, maybe someone who doesn't have a job, who might teach for us, to pay $100 and something to come and work for us? And I mean, this applies, I actually ended up paying it for my own kid to come over here and work, and I thought to myself, well, this is crazy. He ain't got a job yet. So it is tricky, and we might want to consider that was my own personal sidebar, but we might want to consider a way to waive the fingerprinting, because if we have shortages, people should not be going in their pockets saying, I have $100+ to fingerprint. But that's a whole side, and I apologize for throwing that in there, but it's real. Anywho, moving on to observation 11, page 14. Smart Find substitute pool. This is another area where we really do need to do some cleanup. There were quite a few, there were tons and tons of people in the Smart Find pool. Our past practice truly hadn't been to, this is a brand new recommendation, all the content is accurate up top, but to have over 1,000 per diem subs in the system, but most of the people aren't working, something's broke. We really either need to take them out if they're not working for us, because we're getting the illusion of having resources that are truly not working, so then they're not resources. So there is a cleanup effort. I know Dr. Miller and his team is kind of combing through, saying basically, if you're on our books, are you going to work? How can we get you to come and work? Or we need to find some more people, and it lets them know exactly what they're dealing with to meet the subs, and that might be why we're having difficulty. We have an overstated pool, and yet nobody's swimming. Let's just say that. So that is another big issue, to make sure we clean up the pool of substitutes. The last item is dealing with unfilled and open days. This is another addition. We really want to make sure that, since there's reporting between the Smart Find substitute system and the PeopleSoft system with different reasons for the absences, we really want to make sure it's reviewed and there's agreement. Well, the unfilled and open days is that which is used for the paid absence bank that we pay back to the RTA. So we really want to make sure someone goes through that data, ensures it's accurate throughout the year, and make sure there's monitoring, because we don't want to overstate the extra days we're providing to the union to give as paid absence or missed absence days. So we really just want to see some oversight and management in that area, and make sure that that is monitored and assessed to ensure that we are accurately paying out the paid absence bank days. That is the last item. Are there any more questions? Yes, Vice President.
One, I would just want to comment, I would support us figuring out a way to pay for fingerprints for subs who are applying, because again, we have this gap and this need. And if there's any way to use CRESA and ARP dollars, even as a temporary measure to get that pool up with actual candidates, it would be to cover the sub cost, even if it's temporary. The other piece that I want to add is that there are a number of teachers, and this is something I'm looking into and looking at advocating at the state level too, but there are a number of subs who are from other countries who are certified in their country or their state who are struggling to take our test. In New York State, it's a pretty difficult exam. To look at ways where we pay as a district for long-term subs that we've had here, some for years, who are struggled to take the test and are struggling to pay out of pocket because they don't get paid during break. So it's not like our regular teaching staff, when they had winter break last week, they were being paid. Subs don't get paid if they don't work. So all the days that they're not working in the district, they're not getting paid. If there's a way that we can identify those folks, perhaps even give them some guidance and some support, pay for the exam, and also work with the state so that we're only paying one time. Especially if they've already been teaching. Again, I can identify at least 5 subs right now who have been in this district for a number of years teaching, have certified in other states or countries, and have not been able to pass the exam, and also can't afford to keep paying for the exam. So they may not have passed it the first year. They may try to go back and study a little bit more, try to take it in year 3. And sometimes some of it is a language barrier, but those are the folks we need for our MLL populations as well. So if we can really figure out a way to identify those staff internally so that they could become certified and we can remove them out of the sub and move them into permanent openings that we have, especially the specialty areas, I would like us to figure out how to do that moving forward.
Thank you. Great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, to see if we can accept it.
Any further questions at this point in time from anyone?
Well, I really highlighted my document a lot, but Anissa, when you get back, I'd like to sit down with you and sort of go over these with you, so we'll do it at that time. Thank you.
One statement I'd like to make, Vice President LeBron, some of the individuals that, from other countries, is it possible that we could work with our state representatives and have that test, that rigorous test that we take for education, maybe in another language? If they can't really understand the English language, so that might help too. Okay, going forward, I'd like to thank again Anissa Henry Wheeler, our Auditor General, for the wonderful report that she put together for us, so thank you for that. Can I have a motion to accept the substitute management follow-up report?
So moved.
Second. Oh.
So moved by Commissioner
Malloy.
Malloy,
And the
and
second
seconded by
was President.
President Elliott. Okay,
And you need a vote.
right. Okay. Any discussion? All right. At this time, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, the motion is passed. Okay. Okay,
I'm waiting for President Elliott and Commissioner Adams. Are you having trouble, Commissioner Adams? I needed your vote. Do you need me to do that for you?
You needed my vote online?
Yes, unless
Okay,
you would like me to
it
do it
didn't
for you.
pop
Would you
up.
like me to get it for you?
It didn't pop up.
Okay,
had
I will go
logged
ahead
in
and vote
now.
for you.
she's
That
gonna,
it was
she's gonna vote for you.
affirmative?
Okay,
Great, I got it. Thank you so much.
yeah.
All right, the last item, we only need to go into executive session for vendor performance if we need to discuss in detail any information, but I just want to make sure I'm setting up the contract renewals for the board for the upcoming year. I oversee the two auditors, one being the external auditor, the second being the claims auditor. I know you've all very much voiced how pleased you are with both. I just wanted to ensure that I had your agreement to continue on with those two relationships. We do have existing contracts with optional renewals, so that's not even an issue that we need something new, but I wanted to make sure that we were all appropriately on your behalf and moving forward. No objection? Wonderful. That concludes my report. I'll move back to Commissioner Patterson.
Okay, thank you. And one more agenda item. The General Counsel will be sending an update on the consent decree for us to discuss at an upcoming meeting, just so everyone's advised. All right. And last but not least, can we take the a motion, well,
The
let's
board
take the
survey?
board poll.
Okay, do I have to start that, or is that out there?
I think they'll start over there.
Do I have to do something? Okay.
Why is it?
That's Commissioner Board survey, for the board, just for board members.
So you want to make the motion?
I just want to say, though, I do want to go into executive session.
Oh,
Yeah.
Why is
So I have 3 items, so I don't know, James, if you want to read item 7 for executive session, I can make the motion, or I can make the motion now. I don't care.
Let me get through this and then I'll do that.
It's
yeah.
not coming up on mine. I'm clicking it.
so
I see it where it says board meeting survey, but it's not.
Hold on 1 second.
It's not
Who needs to be?
popping up. Right there. Oh, you don't do that? Oh, okay. Thank you.
she just said, something about 3 things.
Madam Vice President? You said you wanted to go into executive session?
Yes. So if you want, I could read, literally, this is what I want to go into executive session to discuss matters related to the employment of a particular issue or matters permitted by Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law, or to receive advice and counsel of the general counsel. It's in regards to,
Discuss pending or current litigation.
and to discuss pending or current litigation. Oh, yes, we do have to go into executive session for Adrian, too. Thank you. So it's a bigger executive session. I have 2 items, and legal is going to talk to us about some issues, too. So that's my motion. Can I get a second?
Get second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are we coming back?
But we can close the meeting, right? Because we're not coming back out to vote on anything.
Well, I think you gotta come out to officially adjourn, after we come out of it.
Okay.
So, but I can close this out, how do I close this? She said stop. So say stop meeting?
All right, for the general public, we'll be going into executive session.
You need to let them know next August.
I took this out. My wife.
And also,
It's not saying okay.
once again, the next audit meeting will be May 3rd, 2022.